Well, welcome to Don't Know Much About, where curiosity always kicks off this conversation. And today I sit down with Dillon Hosier, the Chief Executive Officer at the Israeli-American Civic Action Network, ICAN. ICAN is an organization dedicated to bringing together Israeli-American activists with pro-Israel Americans in the United States and engaging in key policy and legislative initiatives at all levels of government. Dillon has successfully lobbied for state-level Iran sanctions and anti-BDS legislation and previously served for a decade as the political officer at the Israeli consulate in Los Angeles, supporting and strengthening the relationship between Israel and the United States. So welcome to my show, Dillon. Thank you for all your amazing work that you've done to strengthen the United States and Israel relationship.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't know if you know this, but I would like to announce, I think it's interesting that you are my first guest who is a multi-generational American.
Interesting.
Most of my guests, up until you actually, were first-generation immigrants I'm an immigrant, as you know. Mm-hmm. So I want to get into all the work that you're doing with ICAN, especially in the K through 12 space. I think it's absolutely of urgent matter. But before we do that, I want to kick it off by asking you what's on your mind right now that would be summed up in a tagline? Because my show, Don't Know Much About, the tagline is, it all begins with a question. So that's my question. What's on your mind? What sums up at least your philosophy or just, where you're at right now?
So I would say that what is top of mind now, and I think it's actually a critical issue, is to and it's my personal obsession, is to build pro-Israel networks at the state and local level, built off of K through 12 issues or communities. These networks are crucial, I think, to addressing some of the things that we're seeing today in the K through 12 space. But also post 10/7, what we're seeing in city councils and state legislatures. So we need a comprehensive pro-Israel network, just like we have at the federal level. We need it at the state and local level as well.
I see. And so when did you found ICAN?
ICAN was founded in 2019, and we had about a year's worth of work and getting things set up right before COVID. So we are proud to have survived COVID and are running strong now.
And when you formed as an organization, was K through 12 the primary concern? And if not, when did you shift, would you say?
Yeah, so actually, exactly the opposite. So, during my time at the Israeli consulate here in Los Angeles, I focused, as you said, focused primarily on Iran sanctions, anti-BDS, those kinds of things. The fora in which we worked was primarily with Congress and with the state legislature and that kind of thing. So when we founded ICAN, my belief was that the education space was full, that you have several organizations that are working in this space, a lot of cooks in that kitchen, or so I thought. And I actually was against getting involved in K through 12. That being said, I did have an idea that in looking at the education space broadly, and even at the beginning, we were looking more at the higher ed space, not in the K through 12 space. My belief was that there was a lot of organizations involved in that, and that there wasn't much to do in that regard. But I had an idea that we could leverage lobbying approaches, the same way that if I'm going to pass a bill in a state capitol or an ordinance at a municipal level, if we can treat some of the problems that we see on campuses as lobbying problems, then maybe we can have some headway. I decided to test that in 2021, actually, with K through 12. In May of 2021, there was the flare up again with Hamas in Gaza, and the IDF had launched Operation Guardian of the Walls then. And that, of course, violence spilled over into the streets here in the United States. We had the Sushi attack, where young Persian Jews were attacked on the streets just for being Jewish.
Yeah.
And at that time, here, the United Teachers of Los Angeles, UTLA, had introduced a pro-BDS motion, which would have put the union kind of in the position of advocating for BDS within the classrooms. A teacher reached out to me and said, hey, you're a lobbyist, can you help with this? And I said, again, only on one condition I will help you, and I'll engage in this, and that is if we deal with this issue as a lobbying problem. What does that mean? That means that we're not just going to talk about how bad BDS is and educate people about BDS and talk to the proponents of BDS and have a hug session and that kind of thing. We are going to look at the bylaws of the union. We're going to find out who votes, when they vote, what the process is, get the contact information for the people who vote, and then lobby and advocate towards them. We found out at the time, the UTLA has a policy-making body of 250 people. And in practice, it's about 150 or so people who actually vote. And many of them have no idea what BDS is or what any of the policies that the union is promoting are about until they're ready to vote. And they usually kind of vote with whatever the leadership says. But at this time, we lobbied very heavily, that group, and we won that vote. I believe it was 72 to 28%. So it was still 28% of the UTLA thought that BDS should be taught in the classroom. But to win that vote, 72-28, was a sign that we could take that approach, that lobbying approach to K through 12.
Just looking at the bylaws and holding them accountable, really.
Looking at the system, looking at how this process occurs and intervening where necessary.
Well, I want to slow down and take a few steps back because you said a lot, but I think for people who are listening and watching, there's a little bit of an educational curve that needs to occur.
Sure.
And that is
just going on
that the anti-Semitism and the anti-Zionism, rather, in K through 12 was preceded by anti-Zionism in higher education. And that's why, of course, when you were probably with the Israel consulate of Los Angeles, your focus was primarily in higher ed, because BDS was basically, surging, and there were BDS resolutions trying to be passed at the Student Senate, at the Faculty Senate, all over the UC systems that I was aware of in California, the UC universities. And you can, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it was around the year, I would say, even right before COVID, 2018-19, that this type of anti-Israel education was coming into K through 12. Like, if I had to date it, when was this anti-Israel education? Not when were there teachers here and there who had a proclivity towards, let's say, Palestine and an animus towards Israel, but really a curriculum, something that you could say, all right, that's institutional already. Would you say that that's right around the time of COVID, that that bad faith actors really were able to get into the unions and basically disseminate really bad material to then make the anti-Zionism institutional?
So I'd say that your time frame and the instinct is generally correct, and I'm not an authority on this, so I'm going to just tell you what I've seen and observed. First of all, I'd say that the bad actors, I wouldn't say that they entered at that point. I would say that they've been there, right? Many of them, and some of them we know by name, and we know their histories, and they've been active in different ways for decades within the union. But with regard to this topic in particular, I would actually say that it would have started in 2016, because in 2016, this is when they introduced, by the same number, I guess, Assembly Bill 2016, which mandated that the state create an ethnic studies curriculum. And it was that the passage of that bill, which, by the way, it was a total fraud, the way that bill was spoken about and talked about. We all thought it was multicultural education. I was ignorant at the time of what ethnic studies was, and I thought it was multicultural education that had just gone off the rails in implementation. And I was mistaken, and I've learned my lesson, a hard lesson to learn, by the way. But in 2019, if you remember, that's when the draft curriculum came out that mentioned all this crazy BDS and anti-Israel. So that was the draft ethnic studies model curriculum.
Yes, I remember.
So that it was that year that it came out, and I would say that yes, that with the release that year of that curriculum, that kind of lit the fire of activists who may have been in the union and have been active, but it gave them a new purpose for their activism. So I would agree with you that this kicked off then, but the history would have been starting with 2016 and AB 2016.
Right. So let's talk about that ethnic studies. And again, you will correct me, fill in some of those gaps. Ethnic studies, and I appreciate your honesty, by the way, which is that initially when it came on, people rallied around it and supported it because they thought this was a wonderful multi-ethnic, diversity celebration. But then when people looked under the hood of the car, so to speak, they found what? When you said I was mistaken, what did you find? What did you think?
So I want to be very transparent, and this is not the first time I've said this on camera. I've said it previously, but again, looking at Assembly Bill 2016, you look at the text of that bill, it looks like a multicultural education piece of legislation. Then you look at the model curriculum that came out, it was terrible. And but then we went through a 2-year process from 2019, 2020, and then into 2021, where the curriculum was revised. And there is a document right now that is sitting on the California Department of Education website that is that document that was worked on for that 2-year period. And I mention this specifically because that 2-year period, and I'm getting to your point about looking under the hood, led to the passage of a new piece of legislation called AB 101 in 2021, which mandated ethnic studies to be taught as a graduate or taken as a graduation requirement for high school students. And actually, right now, school starts this week in California, and some parts of California, and here in LA. Students who started school this week, according to this law, would have been mandated to take ethnic studies in order to graduate. Now, when you look at that document, it's a 700-page document on the California Department of Education website. You look under the hood. I was shocked, and I only looked under the hood probably within the past 6 months. It's a 700-page document. I'm a lobbyist. I read all day, right? If I don't have to read a 700-page document to see what it is, I'm going to avoid it where I can. But because I knew that we were heading into this period where a graduation mandate was going to be triggered, this right now, I decided to say, what is everybody talking about? What is going on? And I was shocked, and I felt like an idiot, frankly, for having trusted advocates who said that this 600, 700-page document was acceptable. And there were many in the legacy Jewish groups and organizations who said it was acceptable, and I foolishly trusted them because I believed that they're working in the education space. What you saw when you look under the hood is a radical Marxist Islamist ideology. There are guiding principles in this document within the introduction of this curriculum, which talks about things like radical healing and transformational resistance. Now, when we hear the word resistance today, especially within, and I myself am not Jewish, but when we talk about that in the Jewish space, in the Jewish community, with regard to Hamas and so on, that's a charged word that indicates a violence and has led to bloodshed within the Jewish community. And so these are concepts that are being promoted within the classrooms, and frankly, it's a radical extremist mess, this ethnic studies. And so we've done a good job, I think, of mitigating some of the damage that could have been done within with this year in particular. But it's simply a radical curriculum that has no basis on anything except wanting to promote extremism, in my opinion.
Right. I want to stay a little bit longer with ethnic studies because I think it's a really important case study for strategy in terms of how are Jewish organizations, both grassroots, the ones that are more maverick, and the more institutional ones, the legacy, how they're approaching combating it. And so, again, you will correct me, fill in those gaps, but from what I understand, that the problem of ethnic studies, everybody pretty much understood, like you, there was a problem, but the question now became of strategy. And from what I understand, legacy organizations wanted to have a seat at the table. And so they thought we could put some guardrails around that to ensure that anti-Semitism wouldn't enter the curriculum. So they were advocating for that. Others were looking at, let's look at another style ethnic studies. So other organizations, and I'm not going to name them by name right now, but other organizations were coming up with their own ethnic studies curriculum to try to kind of obfuscate the problem of the anti-Semitism. And then there were the other organizations who are much more bold and said, no, ethnic studies, the very discipline itself was born in sin. I'm using strong language,
that's
right?
true. Yes.
It's critical ethnic studies. When I UC Santa Cruz, my alma mater, is a big problem. If you really look even deeper under the hood of that car and trace the origins of this discipline itself, there is no better version of ethnic studies. And so because it was, as I say, born in sin. So there were these, as I say, two approaches. One was diplomatic. We need to have a seat at the table. Let's try to make sure that we could put some guardrails to ensure that there are no mentions of, let's say, Zionism is racism. And then there was another school of thought by these more bold but smaller grassroots orgs who were saying, absolutely not. This is a very dangerous discipline, and we should not be entertaining that for our kids. First of all, did I describe this correctly, would you say? And what would you add to that?
Sort of. So I would, mostly that's correct. The one thing I would change is that I'm not convinced that everybody knows what the problem is. I think there are still some groups, especially among the legacy organizations, that believe ethnic studies is simply a different way of saying multicultural education.
So they still think what you thought before.
Correct.
They still think that.
I don't think they've looked.
Why do you think they think that, though? I mean, it's not like it's available. That's 700 pages. Yes, it's a lot of time, but it's available. It's not like you can claim, I have no idea. So why would they not?
I don't think they did their homework. I think, I can't tell, again, I'm a lobbyist. I can't tell you how many times people either didn't read a bill, even if it's 2 or 3 pages, let alone a 700-page document. Mm-hmm. So I think that they didn't do their homework. They didn't crack open what is actually in the curriculum and being taught in the classrooms. And instead, for them, it's a debate between how nice can I be to a legislator who is dealing with ethnic studies, but I need them to come because I need them to come speak at my gala reception or whatever, versus being a little hard with them because this is not the right thing. I don't think they know what is right or what is wrong, because I don't think they've actually looked. And we know that because this year we had a new bill, and maybe this is what you're alluding to with the guardrails, mm-hmm. which was, and I hate to throw all these numbers out there, but here's another one, AB 1468, which, as you said, would have added guardrails. That's not the only thing it would have done.
What do you think about that?
So we first of all, that bill came out. I call it the Ethnic Studies Expansion Bill, because what it would have done was it would have required ethnic studies standards to have been created within the educational. There are certain types of documents that the Department of Education works with: curricula, frameworks, and standards. Mm-hmm. And so this would have created new standards for ethnic studies. Again, all of these advocates in the federations and in the ADLs and the AJCs, I'm naming names, in my opinion, they didn't look at what these words mean in law. And so when you say we're going to create new standards for ethnic studies, they read that as guardrails. Well, what it really means is they're simply going to embed ethnic studies throughout the social studies and humanities. That means when you study geography, it may be in the 3rd grade, because this wasn't just relegated to high school, it's K through 12. When you study geography in the 3rd grade, it's not just about learning how to read maps and learn about different terrain and mountains and oceans and bodies of water. It is learning all of that through the lens of the cis heteropatriarchy and white supremacy and how that impacts society in the 3rd grade. So we were strongly opposed to this bill, AB 1468. And the day it came out, it took us about a day to analyze the bill. We came out with an analysis, and we opposed the bill because, again, this would have massively expanded ethnic studies throughout social studies and humanities in K through 12. And that would have been a complete disaster. So we went up against all of those groups who thought that this would have been a good thing. And I have to say, and I haven't seen these people in person yet, but if we have an opportunity to discuss this, I would say you should be embarrassed to have supported that bill, because it not only would have destroyed public education for Jews who want to go to school in public schools, but it would have destroyed public education in California. And as goes California, so goes the country in many cases. And it could have destroyed public education throughout the country. So I'm proud that we stopped that bill. And on top of that, California has not funded the AB 101 mandate. And
so that's what I wanted to ask you also. I mean, with all of our kind of like chickens with our heads cut off, we were all running around. And then somebody said, well, actually, there's no funding for it anyway.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what's going on there?
So by the way, I want to give credit to Tammy Rossman Benjamin, who's a colleague.
Dear friend of mine, a mentor. And I want to give a shout out to Amcha later on as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So and I have to say that, Tammy has always been on the right side of this issue. And for myself, I would have to say that, like, you have the legacy groups on one shoulder and Tammy on the other. And I was always like, who do I listen to? And for too long, I listened to the establishment and not Tammy. And Tammy, if you're listening, I owe you an apology for that. But it's true, because she was right and we were all wrong. And Tammy was the one who pushed and pushed and pushed. And finally, in December of 2024, the California Department of Finance released a report saying that in order for this graduation trigger, to be active, you must appropriate $275 million to this budget requirement. Well, that was in December going in. So we knew coming into the legislative session into 2025, January, February 2025, that the only thing we had to do was to stop that $275 million to prevent that funding trigger from activating the graduation mandate. We were shocked, disappointing with the fires and everything that happened here, because that's going to create a big budget hole for California. But we were shocked that on top of this, again, all we had to do to make schools better in California was to stop that appropriation. So for the legacy Jewish groups, 65 of them, by the way, throughout the state of California, to get behind a bill like AB 1468, that would have, by the way, Tammy and I looked at that bill very closely. Both of us believed that there was a trigger in that bill that would have removed the that $275 million requirement, and it would have created an unfunded mandate for ethnic studies throughout K through 12 high schools.
So what was the success in stopping that then?
So we just relentlessly, ICAN, my organization, and our activists just relentlessly advocated against the bill. We pointed out that there's a lot of nuance. I mean, there were smaller things like, for example, the legislator who was the main sponsor, who happens to be the assembly member for where we are now in West LA, 15 years ago, he put forth a bill that created the very guardrails that we depend on with regard to race and ethnicity and ideology. This was passed in the Fair Education Act in 2011. And the main organization behind that bill was Equality California. The executive director of Equality California at that time was Rick Zabur, who is the assembly member for this area right here. And he was the main bill sponsor for AB 1468. So I asked him, I said, Assembly member, you passed these protections 15 years ago. We're talking about enforcement of existing law. So you don't need to create new laws to say that, these guardrails need to exist. You need to enforcing existing law. And that was the argument that we pushed very hard. And again, the Jewish community had the wool pulled over its eyes with this bill because, I literally had a conversation with some activists from the Jewish Federation who claimed, well, there are no protections for Jews until we pass this 1468. Nonsense. They are lying to you. These protections are in law now, and all you have to do is enforce the law. The only reason you don't want to enforce the law is because you don't want to do what? Upset the teachers' unions that you need in order to get your endorsements and money for re-election. That's what this is all about.
Wow. It's crazy. A lot of corruption. I'm sure. Look, you referenced Amcha and Tammy, and I actually wanted to bring up her phenomenal research. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this question, which is, I'm not as plugged in as you are, but I do get calls from community members. And I just recently got a call from someone in the Bay Area that the school is doing a new ethnic studies curriculum, And look, all the Jewish parents and Jewish board members are all excited because look, there's no bad mention of Israel. There's no bad mention of Zionism. Jews are treated very nicely. And she says to me, but there's something wrong. Can you take a look at this curriculum? So I opened the file, and what do I find? It's very interesting. You can't really say that there's any anti-Zionism there. You cannot really say there's any classical anti-Semitism. But what you have there is this priming of the mind to see power as evil.
Correct.
In 2016, or I believe 2017, Tammy Amcha, her organization, did a very important study in higher education. They were looking at faculty. And that is where she's really done a lot of great research, is the role of faculty in what's happening on our campuses.
Absolutely.
And she was interested to know which faculty vote for BDS. Which disciplines? Are you aware?
I know, but I can guess where it's going.
Oh, okay. So she was kind of interested. She was asking the question, which faculty and, consequently, which disciplines are most likely to support BDS? And she found that it wasn't political science, and it wasn't Middle Eastern studies or Islamic studies. It was English, Department of English, Department of Sociology, anthropology. And so she said, she and her researchers thought to themselves, well, that's strange. What's going on there? Why is a discipline that's interested in literary criticism all of a sudden have this high percentage of faculty that support BDS? And she started digging more, and she looked at the faculty and looked at their research interests. And she basically identified 4 research interests, and they were race, gender, class, and empire. Those were the 4. And what unites all 4 is power, really.
Right. Yeah.
And so that woman who called me, my dear friend, who's very concerned, who's an activist about this curriculum that is now being told to her, hey, there's no problem. There's no anti-Semitism. It's all good to go. But she sees the warning signs. She sees that it's all drenched in this class, gender, power, empire. You know that in that curriculum, a student will walk out being pro-Hamas. How do you get people to see that? How do we get people to see that? Because that's where I want to, you don't have to sometimes have a swastika in order to know where it's going to be. Or you don't need to have sometimes even from the river to the sea slogans to know where that's going. You can kind of infer based on the frameworks that are going to be applied.
Yeah.
Well, how do we get the Jewish organizations to understand? First of all, do you agree? What are your thoughts?
So 100% I agree. And actually you're touching on, you are literally on the cutting edge of what is the problem in this policy area right now. Because people like me, and I'm still advocating, and in fact, I think that soon, hopefully in the next few weeks, if not sooner, we will begin a campaign to target that 700-page curriculum. All of it flows from that, right? It's all being extracted from that core document for the most part, or even the draft curriculum that was rejected by the legislature. So what we are seeing now is, by the way, a similar thing happened in the state version that was accepted. They removed all the pro-BDS and all the anti-Israel stuff out, but. And again, I just did this over the past 6 months, 8 or 9 months, I guess, looking at that document up close. Do you know that there is a Jewish section in that in the state curriculum? And it was our own colleagues who put that in. I am very disappointed to share with you that in that curriculum, there is one community or one group of people that are mentioned as being white passing, and that's Jews in that curriculum. So of all the other types of different people that are mentioned in that, only one are being labeled with this white passing, which to me is racist.
So there's still demonization of white people in this curriculum.
So there's still demonization. And I would say that our task now is to educate that, again, ethnic studies is not multicultural education. It is a fancy word, in my opinion, for Islamo-Marxist activist teaching.
Let me kind of try, because I tend to be more on your kind of thinking with this, but let me try to at least articulate the position of a legacy Jewish organization. which is, look, the Jewish people are a minority, and we've always been in these precarious positions. And to go out there and stick our necks out and to go against ethnic studies is literally to commit suicide for the Jewish community. We need to stand with other minority groups. We need to, it's bad optics, and it's ultimately going to be bad for the Jewish people, because we need to build coalitions. We need these people. We cannot do it on our own. We're few in number. And as I said, I don't want to, repeat myself, but because we are such a small minority, our survival depends on, it's bad to go out there and say ethnic studies is bad.
That was a good impression. I have a little bit of PTSD just hearing you say that. So the reality is that ethnic studies is not about the stories and the backgrounds of diverse cultures. It's about oppressor versus oppressed. It's about power. I have a master's in political science. My specialty in political science is in international relations, international security policy, and American politics. That is power. That's all about power. By the way, throughout my educational career, I would not have fully understood those concepts and those ideas even until after my undergraduate education. But to put this in high school, the concepts of power, oppressor, and oppressed in high school, that's so fringe and so off base. That's hard for people to understand it without the activist kind of thinking behind it. So my answer to my dear friends in legacy Jewish organizations is that it's not about the story of Latin American people. It's not about the stories of Black people or their struggles. There may be anecdotal vignettes embedded in some of this curriculum, but it is about power. It is about oppressor versus oppressed, and the identities of groups that are mentioned in this curriculum are there to reinforce those concepts and ideas, not to share about the diversity of our state here in California, for example. So it's a total misnomer. I'm all for multicultural education. I want to celebrate the diversity of this state and how interesting and the different histories and all of that. That's not what this is. So
do you think that what this is actually using and abusing these minorities, using them 100%. To attack power being now, let's say, America or the white people, whatever?
Yes.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, somebody sent me, I won't remember the name, but a Twitter account or X account, whatever it's called nowadays. And it's made by a group that is a part of the teachers' unions. And it's basically lambasting groups like yours. Mm-hmm. Who are basically attacking ethnic studies. And they're saying by attacking ethnic studies, it's very clever what they're doing. They're saying they're attacking Black students in the classroom. They're shutting down those voices. So what they're doing now, what the video that I saw, and I could share it with you afterwards, is they're saying, when you attack you, Amcha, Pure K, when you are attacking ethnic studies, who suffers? The student, the minority student in the classroom, who will not have a chance to be seen in the curriculum, because somewhere along the way in our education, we've been told that one of the goals of education is for the student to see him or herself in the curriculum, to center their identity in the curriculum, which, I mean,
it's a lie. That's a lie. Yeah.
It's a lie, and it's so wrong.
Right.
It's just so wrong. It's like this navel gazing of like, why are we telling our students that the goal of education is to learn about themselves and center themselves in history?
Yeah. So look.
But what I'm trying to tell you is that it's going to take a lot of courage, because they're very they're going on the offense, and they're saying groups, of course they're labeling, demonizing right wing, white supremacist, Nazi, Zion Nazis. Right. These groups are basically shutting down the opportunity of the children in the classroom. It's not even, we're upset that you're trying to take down ethnic studies. They're saying now, by taking down ethnic studies, you are actually attacking the student.
You're silencing voices.
You're silencing voices.
Yeah. You're silencing minority voices that have been marginalized and disenfranchised by a white supremacist imperialistic society. That is nonsense, and it is very clever politics. It's politicking at the end of the day, because ultimately, look, like we can talk about the details and the backs and forths about what this really means. At the end of the day, this is about political power. These teachers unions and the K through 12 communities are breeding grounds for what? For school board members, who then become city council members, who then become state legislators, who then become members of Congress. And the activists who are involved in this, many of them are teachers, are simply activists who are working towards their preferred political outcome in different jurisdictions or different fora. So while they may be fighting in the classrooms today and making these arguments in the classroom, what they're really trying to do is shape society around these concepts and ideas and to silence political opposition. Because if they have power to teach what they want to teach in this way in the classroom, then they can marginalize all sorts of voices. And by the way, a core concept within ethnic studies is to be anti-capitalist. And there is actually a within the state curriculum, and I'm smiling and kind of laughing because it's so absurd, but it's actually very dangerous. There is a concept or an idea called anthropocentrism. Do you know what anthropocentrism means? It means that to center thoughts and ideas and policies around people versus the environment. And ethnic studies is meant to fight against anthropocentrism. Right. So what does that mean? It's an anti-capitalist concept. And so at the end of the day, it is fringe, radical, progressive ideology masquerading as multiculturalism off the backs of people who are Latino, Black, Asian, Native American, whatever. They're using these identities as a way to just again advance and further their concepts against economic ideas and economic concepts at the end of the day.
So in your ideal world, if ICAN had a dream that could come true within relation to ethnic studies, what would that be then?
That it be completely, so my dream would be that ethnic studies be completely removed from K through 12. There's no reason that it should be discussed in K through 12. If you want to take it in university, fine, go take it in university. I don't have any problem with that. But anything...
Should it be replaced by something else?
Yeah, history. It's just history and English. Like, we don't need ethnic studies. We need history and English. And by the way, science, math, other core areas of education that will help a person be productive members of society. What ethnic studies creates are people who are productive activists, not productive members of an economy.
Yeah. Well, let me switch to something more personal.
Sure.
Which I'm sure you get this question a lot. So I'm going to ask you, you're not Jewish.
Correct, right.
But you have dedicated your life to advocating for Israel, for the Jewish people, and against anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. So I want to understand.
Why is that? Why did you do that? So, first of all, I grew up here in LA, and it's a pretty Jewish city, actually. And, Jews have always been, I guess, in a way, I've been Jewish adjacent all of my life.
What area of LA did you grow up in?
San Fernando Valley.
San Fernando, okay.
And what's the big community in the San Fernando Valley and the Jewish community?
It's the Israeli.
It's the Israelis. That's right. So my first job out of high school actually was at an Israeli engineering company from Israel. It wasn't like a contractor or a construction company. It was actually a for real engineering company from Netanya that had a facility in Canoga Park, actually. And that was my first experience working at within an Israeli office, wondering why is it when people are talking, they're always yelling? Is everybody mad at each other all the time? So I say that to say that, I'm comfortable around Israelis. I've always had some...
So you were exposed to the Israelis early on.
Exposed to Israelis early on. And then after grad school, I got a job. I was working in the private sector and I wanted to work in government. As I said, my education is in political science. And there was an ad that said, foreign government seeks political officer. It didn't even say what government it was for. And I got a phone call and they said, listen, your name is Dillon, yes? Okay, do you like Jews? Like, yeah, Jews are fine. That's okay. What about Israel? Yeah, sure, Israel's okay. Great. They were from the Israeli consulate, and the rest is history. So first of all, I come from a pretty open-minded family, and we were accepting and pluralism and all that kind of thing. But I would say that my time at the Israeli consulate and seeing the dynamic of what was going on, really kind of it created, I feel, a moral obligation to do this work because I've been exposed to things, I've seen things, and I know things, and I know I can contribute. And so to me, like not contributing would be a negative thing. And so I just feel like I have to speak up. Today, after 10/7, even more so, right? I mean, the things that I've seen prior to 10/7 motivated me to create ICAN, but after 10/7 now the world is upside down, and I cannot understand what world we're living in, where even, by the way, some of the things that, regardless of where you are on politics, left, right, center, whatever, there's an anti-Semitism problem in America, and you have to recognize that. You have to see that when two of people that I would consider colleagues, Sarah and Yaron at the embassy, who got assassinated. And by the way, I can't tell you how many times I've been in that exact same position, walking out of an AJC event or any other kind of event, and having those safety concerns, and to see those two gunned down like that, it really shook my world. It still shakes me today. But we have to fight back against this. The Jewish community is too small to not have allies. And if I can contribute in some way and make things better, happy to do it. So that's kind of my my motivation. So,
well, let me ask you another question, because it's kind of interesting for me. I always find that people who are not in the in crowd have a much more interesting observation about the in crowd.
Absolutely.
So, for instance, Alex de Tocqueville wrote about America, being a Frenchman, and he also went to Russia and wrote about the Russian Empire. Not being Jewish, what are your observations about Jews in America, and kind of what we talked about earlier, this tepid advocacy, which is we have to have a seat at the table, this kind of what I have at least identified as a gravitation towards a universalism. And then there are the particularist Jews who want to ghettoize almost themselves to such a degree where they're just kind of so insular. What are your observations I mean, I don't even know if you're an outsider anymore. Like, I feel like you're Jewish. So, but like as an outsider, what would those observations be?
So I look, I still try to keep that outsider hat as much as possible because I think it's instructive and it helps me to see things differently. And I would say that one of the things that I have seen and that I've observed that also motivated me to do this work, motivates me strongly today, is that there's a massive gap between what I would call the immigrant Jewish community, which are Israelis, Persian Jews, Russian Jews, the rest of the Middle East Jews, and American Jews. And I will say, I grew up in LA. I grew up in the Valley.
You're American.
San Fernando Valley. I'm American. My family came here in 1631. As I told you, I've got the Civil War papers from my great-great-great-grandfather who fought for the Union. Mm-hmm. And when I was working at the Israeli consulate, one of the things that I saw most often was a disrespect for Israelis. A treatment that they're like third-class citizens. That
from whom?
From the American Jewish community.
Oh, American Jewish.
That these are our loud, annoying cousins. Please, don't ignore them. We'll show you the way. We're the more refined part of the community. And that's hard for me to say, but it's what I observed. And
which, by the way, happened in New York when the Jews from Eastern Europe arrived. They were known as Ostjuden, mm-hmm. the Jews from the East, and they were looked down upon as kind of the backward, parochial Jews who just, kind of
right.
don't get it.
Right.
They haven't made it.
Right. Exactly. Right. So, so that to me was kind of off-putting and shocking, I guess. And then I will say, like, I was working in an office that was the official representation of the State of Israel, part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is the Israeli State Department. And I can't tell you how many times an American Jewish leader would call and say something like, tell your minister to stay home, or tell your prime minister he can't come speak to Congress. He's going to make more mess than do good.
And this was from American Jewish leaders.
These are from American Jewish leaders. And I just think that is so Current Israeli diplomats may not like me saying that openly. I'm sure it still happens today, but that's totally unacceptable.
I'm sorry, which is, I have to say, it's ironic because I'm going to go on record to say this, because I would put my money on believing that these are the people who would be for multiculturalism and respect of the other, and we should not scapegoat.
With one exception, immigrant Jews. That's the exception that I see. And so in this, to bring it full circle, in this ethnic studies fight, it's the immigrant Jewish communities who have been marginalized by their own American Jewish community. But I will say, in this past, how we defeated that bad ethnic studies bill, those communities. We mobilized those communities across the state of California, and we demonstrated that the legacy Jewish organizations, in particular, do not have constituencies. They have board members. They have boards. And so if you're looking for voters, if you're looking for a groundswell of support from a community, you're not going to get it from the legacy Jewish groups. You might get money. You might get invited to a gala or whatever. Mm-hmm. And when I say you might get money and not from the organization itself, because they can't do politics, but you might get it from some of the board members who will donate to your political campaign if you're an elected official. So electeds tend to pay close attention to the American Jewish community because they tend to be highly civically integrated. They vote often, they donate often, and they'll have elected officials and they'll have relationships with elected officials. Immigrant Jewish communities do not have that to the same degree. And to me, that is something that I am really focused on changing. And so at ICAN, even though we're called the Israeli-American Civic Action Network, we do have a home and a space for the Persian Jewish community and the Russian Jews as well. And in fact, this year, I really want to make sure that on November 30th, and in as many jurisdictions as we can, we recognize that Jews were expelled from Arab lands in Iran. That's the day that the Knesset has designated for that commemoration. And we're trying to do it here in Los Angeles as well. So I think that, as an outsider, is one of the things that I have seen that is incredibly dangerous for the Jewish community, I would say. Mm-hmm. And to your point, in my opinion, you're correct. The legacy Jewish community organizations today are trying to create a American Jewish community that is exclusive or excludes Israel. And so, they may paper over it and say, but we've donated X tens of millions of dollars to Israel after and since 10/7. Mm-hmm. Fine. But that doesn't mean that you get to exclude or marginalize Israelis or other kinds of immigrant Jews in your own community.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I'm from a Russian-speaking home, mm-hmm. was born in the former Soviet Union, and I remember, when my mother, I was much younger, would go to Jewish Federation meetings about Israel. They would never take Russian-speaking Jews seriously. They would always label us as just like, right-wingers. Right. Right.
Well, they're left-wingers, by the way. If we want to talk about partisanship, the legacy Jewish organizations are extensions of the Progressive Democratic Party, essentially. So, I mean, if they want to talk about partisanship, they are partisan on the left. I'm sorry, I'm saying that as a political science person. So, as much as they want to criticize others for being right-wing, they're left-wing.
Right. Yeah.
They're not centrists. They're left-wing.
Right. I guess it's just that I listen. Some of the questions I asked, they're obviously not pre-planned. And so when I asked you, what do you notice as an outsider? That's something I didn't really expect. And it made me want to just reflect. And you're right, that there is this elitism within the American Jewish institutions towards other Jews.
Correct.
And the irony is that it's these other Jews who are saving the American 100%. Jews right now.
They're not just saving American Jews, they're saving America, I would say, because to me, this fight that we're in, again, to answer your question about why I do this is a fight. I used to say it's a fight for Western civilization. It's just a fight for civilization at this point, right? There's no other civilization besides Western civilization, in my opinion. And Israel and the United States are on the front lines of that fight. If we lose Israel, we lose. If we lose America, Israel loses. So we are the tip of the spear in that fight, in my opinion. And it is not the American Jewish legacy groups that are going to win in that fight. In my opinion, it's the Israelis, it's the Persians, it's the Russian Jews who are going to be the ones to really figure out ways to combat anti-Semitism in a way that also addresses them and their communities. I say it's dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Why am I using the word dangerous? danger as it relates to the American Jewish community in this space, because they are trying to create policies that exclude people like you and do not include your background in their kind of prevention of anti-Semitism, for example. Or if they don't include Israel, I had a discussion, and maybe we can break some news here. You know, one of the things that Karen Bass did when she was first in office, within the first month of her being in office here in Los Angeles, which was almost 4 years ago, her office tried to repeal the passage of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. Now, whatever you think about that definition and however it functions, her office was trying to repeal it. Why? Because it mentioned Israel. Right. And so she tried to call all of her friends, and I won't necessarily name names right now about who she tried to call, but there were legacy Jewish groups who wanted to work with her to repeal or amend that resolution to exclude the mention of Israel. Now, when you have a legacy Jewish organization, a major legacy Jewish organization doing that in a city like this, what message does that send to elected officials, to the mayor, about the value of Israelis in that community? Or the Israeli people in that community? And that's just one example.
Right.
And that really gets me fired up, and I think it's totally unacceptable that that's happening.
Yeah. Well, listen, as we're wrapping up, I want to thank you for your courage. You really are, and your honesty, your kind of brutal honesty.
I hope not too brutal.
No, I think that's missing today.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what, if I had to like draw a thread through all the guests that I bring on, they're just very honest and where they are. Before we finish, how could people get involved with ICAN? What can they do? What is your kind of outgoing message?
So you'll find us online. The URL
Where can you find, first of all, yes, let's do that.
Yeah, sure. So you can find us online at israelusa.org. Super easy URL, israelusa.org. Sign up. There's a sign up thing. You can join our website there. We are active right now in 4 states: California, Washington, Massachusetts, and Nevada. We're really focusing on California and Massachusetts right now, especially in the K through 12 space. Go on, connect, sign up, and follow us on social media. And we're always running campaigns. There's a whole list of campaigns on our website now we're running. So that's the best way to get involved.
Thank you so very much for your time. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for tuning in on this very special episode where we did a deep dive into ethnic studies, its origins, strategies to combat it, what works, what doesn't, and a very unique outsider's view on American Jewry. Thank you so much. Till next time.